We'll look at what stood out on the All-22 with Josh Paunil in just a moment. I do want to, real quick before Josh comes in, this was John Gruden this morning on Mike and Mike.
He can handle a lot of football, just like he did in college. He can come out of the huddle, call a lot of different kind of plays. They're not just lining up in one or two formations like some of these teams. They're running unbalanced lines, slot formations, no back sets. They're asking him to audible. They're putting a lot on the quarterback. That's what impresses me the most. That's why I liked him, because of his preparation in college.
Let's bring Josh into the conversation now. And, he threw a lot out at us there. And he said they asked him to do a lot of audibling and changing things and move a lot of different formations. You watched him on the All-22 and got a chance to really break it down. Was this a guy who not only performed well, but had a lot thrown at him?
Yeah, it was definitely more than I expected. I think the game plan was still relatively simple for what a West Coast offense could be, but it was definitely, considering that you have a rookie quarterback playing his first game in the NFL, he did a lot more and had a lot more on his plate than I was expecting. One thing that immediately jumped out to me was on the 28-yard completion to Jordan Matthews. I want to say it was the second quarter. It was actually after the Browns had that ill-fated fourth down attempt when they had the punter on the field and they tried running out of the Wildcat. I don't know what it was, but it was that fourth down attempt that just was disastrous, and the Eagles capitalized and completed a 28-yard pass. And what stood out was Carson Wentz recognized that there was a blitz coming up the middle from the linebackers. And so he adjusted the play. Well, he didn't change the play, but he adjusted the pass protection. He dropped back into shotgun, and he changed up the blocking scheme so he would have time to deliver the ball to Jordan Matthews, who was running a corner route. So it's just things like that you really don't get to appreciate until you go back and watch the film and you see, oh, wow, if it wasn't for Carson Wentz changing the pass protection on that play, maybe instead of a 28-yard completion, which set up a field goal, he gets sacked, and they don't get any points out of that drive. So there are definitely things on his plate that he was able to take advantage of that the Eagles got points off of.
Yeah, and a lot of it we were talking before, Josh, is about, look, a lot of these players in the league can make the throws. They have good accuracy, or they can make good throws and drop some passes in there, but they don't have it between the ears. Were there a couple of plays, a couple of times that you saw that personified that, where, yeah, he made great throw, but if he didn't do the intangibles, the throw's never possible?
Yeah, and that's an important thing that you hit on. Is I don't think that it's necessarily the throws that set a lot of the NFL quarterbacks apart, but it's what you mentioned. It's how quickly can you diagnose the defense? Can you see what the leverage of a defender is on the receiver? And then just things like sticking in the pocket and standing tall in the face of a hit. One of the biggest plays that stood out to me when rewatching that game is that fourth down attempt when there was a free runner up the middle. Pretty much any coach, any scheme, no matter what level of football it is, you should never have a free runner up the middle in the A-gap. Even if the team blitzes more guys than you can block, the free runner should be on the edge, giving your quarterback more time. But it didn't phase Carson Wentz. He stood tall. He still delivered the throw to Zach Ertz over the middle, and they got that huge first down. So it's plays like that where just sticking in the pocket, and that's an impressive play that can a lot of guys make that throw? Yes. But can they make the throw under that pressure? No. And those are the types of plays that even in his first NFL game kind of set Carson Wentz apart.
Josh Paunil of Birds, 24/7 at PhillyMag.com, taking a look at some of the plays that stood out here. Because Wentz is getting a lot of credit for some of the things that he did and some of the throws and plays that he made. But what role did Doug Peterson, Frank Reich have in designing some of these plays in the way that they utilized his talents with some of these play calls?
Yeah, well, Doug Peterson, he, especially with how much doubt some people had for him throughout the spring and throughout the summer, he really is, I don't want to say unsung hero because he's the head coach. People should know how big of a role he plays, but I don't think he gets enough credit. Just the game plan that he had for Carson Wentz, even the opening drive, moving the pocket for Carson Wentz, giving him some easy throws to establish a rhythm. And then later on, when they took those shots to the end zone, both of those Carson Wentz touchdown passes were those fade routes. And those are the types of passes that obviously Carson Wentz does best. So Doug Peterson, in some of those plays, they weren't West Coast offense staples. They were plays that Doug Peterson put in specifically for this week against this Cleveland defense. So Doug Peterson definitely deserves a ton of credit for not just how Carson Wentz played, but also the win. I mean, using Matt Tobin, something small like using Matt Tobin as a sixth offensive lineman or third tight end, however you want to look at it, bringing him in for several plays that helped the blocking. And just small things like that he did and that he called in these plays. I mean, one thing that we see now with Doug Peterson is the running backs chipping defensive ends before they go out to run their route, which really helps the offensive line and pass protection. That's why Carson Wentz had so much time for a lot of these throws to throw the ball, is because the running backs were able to help out in pass protection, which we didn't see really with Chip Kelly in Philadelphia. So there are a lot of small things built into these plays that Doug Peterson should definitely get a lot of credit for.
Hey, the touchdown to Agholor. Tell us what you saw that stands out on that, because I think, the fact that Nelson, a lot of people talk about the throw. Wentz puts it right where it needs to be. But also, what impressed you about Wentz on that play, but also about Agholor on that play that maybe should have us intrigued?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, Nelson Agholor had a great release, and it wasn't like he was going up against one of the Browns' worst cornerbacks. He was going up against Joe Hayden, a Pro Bowl cornerback. He had a great release against him. He quickly got the edge and created a little bit of separation. And Carson Wentz delivered a beautiful throw, and it was a great play call by Doug Peterson. But that was just a beautiful route by Nelson Agholor. And then even on the other side, Dorial Green-Beckham, he actually got open on the exact same route on the opposite side of the field. So Carson Wentz decided, you know what, I'm not sure if Nelson created enough separation against Joe Hayden. He could have gone to the other side of the field. So there were actually a lot. I mean, and that was the case on the Jordan Matthews touchdown pass. Dorial Green-Beckham looked like Carson Wentz could have thrown it to him on the fade route on that play too. So it's not just Nelson Agholor running these good routes, but Dorial Green-Beckham, I think he only had maybe 2 catches for 14 or 15 yards, but he was getting open too, especially on these big plays, but the ball just went elsewhere. But yeah, Nelson Agholor definitely, especially for the preseason and the training camp he had, he definitely showed some significant strides, particularly compared to last year.
Yeah, it's funny because are you telling us now, Josh, that these receivers are better than we gave them credit for?
Well, I could say that they were better against Cleveland than we gave them credit for. Now, we'll see if they can do this every week. I mean, obviously they had, I want to say, at least maybe 5 or 6 drops. Jordan Matthews had a couple, and those are the plays where, I mean, every team drops the ball, but as people in Philadelphia know, not everyone drops the ball like the receivers did in Philadelphia last year, and to get 5 or 6 drops in a game is not acceptable. So you can have a little bit of concern about that, but the attitude that I would have if I'm an Eagles fan, whether it's about Carson Wentz or the receivers or even this team, is just cautious optimism. The Eagles gave you plenty of reasons to believe that they could be a little bit better this year than people expect, especially with the rest of the NFC East not exactly having a stellar showing in Week 1.
No, let me ask you this. Let me interject real fast on that. You talk about the NFC East. Would you say the Eagles have the best defense in the division?
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, if you that's where I would say forget Wentz and forget the offense. Even if Bradford, that was the whole reason this year you thought you had any shot. Really, was this defense should be significantly, better than last year. Forget personnel, just not being on the field nearly as much.
Yeah, and that's one thing I thought it was funny. I was talking to Brandon Graham about this very topic after the game, and he told me, compared to what we're used to playing, it felt like we didn't play very much at all. Like, I want to go back out there and play some more. Brandon Graham, he didn't have enough. He wanted to go back out there and play another football game because he played way less than he was used to when the Eagles obviously had the up-tempo offense, especially last year when they went 3 and out so quickly and so often. It definitely had an effect on the defense.
Yeah, and you throw in the fact that it seemed that Jim Schwartz was rotating those guys to keep those guys fresh. So that was another big factor that really, I thought, came into play late in the game.
Definitely, and that's one thing that, even the backup defensive lineman I thought played pretty well. Bo Allen was a guy. I know Bo Allen thinks he's a running back now after getting in on the goal line as a fullback for Ryan Matthews' rushing touchdown. But Bo Allen had a pretty good game, and the entire defensive line, really, that's why Jim Schwartz is able to rotate, and that's why they kept, maybe 10, 11 defensive linemen, and why so many are active on game day is because of how much Schwartz likes to rotate. And you're going to see even more rotation at defensive end because Vinny Curry, I think he played around 40, 45% of the snaps. Now that he's fully healthy and he's kind of back in the swing of things, I would expect him to get a little bit of a bump in those snaps. But the defensive line rotation is absolutely going to be a reason why you would actually expect the pass rush to get better as the game goes on, as opposed to how it was previously.
And I guess that goes hand in hand with what I thought, and you could probably have seen this more on the film, is Fletcher Cox just causing all sorts of problems. And when you and I talked on Friday, I'll give you a lot of credit for talking about the center, Cam Irving, those poor snaps. I thought that was a huge play in the game. But
absolutely,
overall, the fact that Cox was such a handful, they had to have two guys on him in the second half because he was disruptive so much in the first half, and that allowed Graham and then for Barwin to just run right past Joe Thomas, who's no stiff. That really showed the importance of keeping those guys fresh and how much of a handful Fletcher was.
Yeah, that's one thing that was evident from the film immediately, even during the first few plays of the first quarter was, Fletcher Cox and Benny Logan too. They were just immovable on a lot of these snaps. The Browns would double team them. And like I said before, even Bo Allen had a couple of snaps like this. These defensive tackles will get double teamed, but you still couldn't move them. And it was very impressive just to watch how tough it was for the Browns offensive line. Now, granted, it wasn't, a great offensive line they were going up against, but still, the defensive line really freed things up. When they wreak so much havoc, they can make things easier on the linebacking core.
Yeah, and real quick, you look at, as you just said, the Browns don't have a great offensive line, but let's be honest, that's a position in the NFL that is down almost across the board. Interior offensive line play, it seems from top to bottom in this league, save for a handful of teams, that's an area where you can really exploit.
I agree. I completely agree, and that's why that's going to be the unit that can really determine how well the Eagles can compete for the NFC East title. Because if you look around the division, like the Giants, for example, they don't have a very good offensive line, and so that's a matchup against New York in particular the Eagles will want to exploit. And then Dallas. I know Eagles fans aren't thrilled hearing about the Cowboys' offensive line, and I do understand people who think they may be a bit overrated. But when it comes to run blocking, they're not. But when it comes to pass protection, this is a unit that can be exploited. So when you look across the division, not just NFL, but particularly the NFC East, this Eagles defensive line could really give the team a spark and really keep them in a lot of these games this year.
How big of a loss? Because I think two plays really stand out. The snap, I thought, turned that game into a different, because of the safety. Then they get the ball, and then they go to, the Agholor touchdown. But the first drive, Ertz, that catch extends that drive. And the fourth down play, that's a tough catch he makes there. Might not be there this week and maybe longer. In fact, probably won't be there this week and maybe longer. How big of a loss to this offense and Wentz will Ertz be?
It's definitely a notable loss just because Zach Ertz was the focal point of this offense. You mentioned it, the fourth down conversion, he had the one-handed catch, but also he's just really the safety valve for Carson Wentz this offense. And he's the guy that, okay, maybe it's first or second and long and nothing's there. Just give it to Ertz. Maybe he'll get you 5 or 6 yards, 6 or 7, and he'll give you second or third and manageable. So there are a lot of situations where even when Zach Ertz doesn't make a big play, he'll just give you at least a little bit to make the next down or make the next first down easier for you. So Trey Burton should be coming back this week. He sat out and couldn't play this past Sunday because of a late injury he sustained on Friday. And Trey Burton had a very good training camp. He really impressed really almost every day. So I'm really curious to see how he fills that void. As you mentioned, it would be pretty surprising for Zach Ertz to play, and he could definitely miss at least 2 or maybe even 3 games. I mean, this is not day-to-day. It's a week-to-week injury. But Trey Burton, he stood out in the preseason, but now it's going to be his chance to prove that he can do it in the regular season as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested because we heard a lot about Burton. If they put him in a similar role that they put Ertz in, if they will basically lean on him as kind of a security guy, will those reps and those throws go to Selleck?
Well, Brent Selleck will definitely get an increase in those types of plays. I mean, I think it was the first drive, the opening drive, when Carson Wentz just dumped it off to Brent Selleck, and he picked it up. He maybe even picked up the first down, or he got close, just by putting his head down and bulldozing a couple of defenders and getting his yards after contact. So Brent Selleck is also a guy that the Eagles and Carson Wentz will be very comfortable with as a safety valve. I mean, that's the luxury of having 3 quality tight ends on your roster. Obviously, you don't want Zach Ertz to go down. You don't want him to miss any time. But tight end is probably the best position they have on offense, particularly when it comes to depth.
Couple other news and notes. You wrote about Kendricks looked like the odd man out here, and they kept the 4 linebackers. Tulloch didn't get a lot of time, but Kendricks didn't get a lot of time either. It seemed that it was Bradham and Hicks as the 2 linebackers that really got the most playing time in that game. Do you think that evolves, or are those the 2 guys that Schwartz trusts the most?
Well, I mean, according to Doug Peterson, what he said on Monday, Michael Kendricks will not see a significant increase in snaps going forward. I mean, he said, right now Michael Kendricks, when we go to that nickel defense and leave in 2 linebackers, which obviously is used a ton around the NFL, Doug Peterson said Michael Kendricks is the odd man out, and he ends up coming off the field. And that's not what you want to hear about a guy who's making $29 million over 4 years, playing just 37% of the snaps because you can't stay on the field in nickel situations. So it doesn't appear that Michael Kendricks will get a larger role anytime soon. And then I also think it's fair to say that he doesn't seem too happy right now, because he said earlier this offseason that a big reason he didn't play as well last year is because of the rotation, and he didn't play enough to get into a rhythm. And so it looks like it's going to be the exact same scenario this year. So that's really going to be something to keep your eye on as the season goes on.
A lot of money there for him. We talked about the receivers and how much they impressed in week 1. We certainly want to see more, and the Eagles worked out a bunch of receivers this week, including former second-round pick Aaron Dobson of the New England Patriot, or formerly of the New England Patriot. Poor Dobson, he's been in San Francisco, Philadelphia. I think he was in San Diego today. That guy's been all over the place, but I guess it shows that the Eagles still looking to add to that position.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely reinforces the notion to you can be happy about how this receiving corps played against Cleveland, and they did. They showed significant improvement, but it is against the Browns, and this is a position group that Howie Roseman and the Eagles personnel department just continues to look at, okay, how can we upgrade this? So I don't think this is a position that they're going to be happy or just settle for anytime soon. Even if the Eagles receiving corps has another good week this week and cuts down on the drops, you'll still probably see some receivers come in and work out for the team. So that's the position group where, even though they showed signs of progress, it's still probably the weakest unit on this offense.
Real quick, I know Monday's a far way off, but just initial thoughts on the Bears in week 1, this matchup, on how Philadelphia matches up with Chicago.
It's a good question. Well, this Bears team, they definitely have more talent than Cleveland, but I still don't think it's a very impressive group. I don't know what Vegas says about the game, but I would give the Eagles a slight edge, even though they're going on the road. This Bears team it's not the most impressive group. They have Will Fuller, the cornerback, and they have some pass rushers off the edge. But that's actually one position that I thought played very well for the Eagles was their tackles. Jason Peters and Lane Johnson, they played very well, particularly in pass protection against Cleveland. Now, there were some snaps where it may have looked like the Eagles' offensive line was responsible for pressure. It was actually Carson Wentz just either missing his hot read or not changing the pass protection as he was supposed to. But those left and right tackles the Eagles have played well against Cleveland, and I think they'll be able to stymie the Bears' pass rush this upcoming week. And same with the interior offensive line. I don't think Jason Kelce had the greatest game against Cleveland, but Alan Barber, he played very well. He was impressive. I mean, he got a lot of criticism for his play last year, but the way he played against Cleveland, combined with Jason Peters and Lane Johnson, who, I mean, I assume Lane Johnson will play. If we haven't heard by now about a Lane Johnson suspension and a potential appeal, I would imagine he would play again this week. So even though the Bears have more in terms of pass rushers, I think the Eagles will be able to continue to give Carson Wentz time and kind of pick apart those matchups. Particularly, I would imagine that they're going to try to exploit the matchups outside of Will Fuller because he's the Bears' top quarterback, and he's the guy that you probably want to stay away from.
Bears are a 3-point favorite, by the way, in the game. Monday night, that's across the board. So good stuff. Josh Paunil, make sure you give Josh a look over at phillymag.com. Birds 24/7. It's one of the stops you got to make before each and every Eagles game and after every Eagles game. And, of course, Josh, always kind enough to join us here on the Bash 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, pal.
Thanks, Mike.